On the day of the most anticipated wedding of the year, Richard Marshall's lavish mansion was filled with an air of expectation. The perfectly manicured lawn and meticulously tended gardens served as the backdrop for a ceremony that promised to be nothing short of spectacular. Inside the mansion, Ashley Miller, Richard's soon-to-be wife, was surrounded by bridesmaids, stylists, and photographers, all working in unison to ensure every detail was perfect. Ashley, in her stunning white silk dress adorned with delicate embroidery and crystals, looked at her reflection in the mirror with a mix of nervousness and excitement. She knew she was about to realize her dream of marrying a wealthy and powerful man, a dream she had nurtured since childhood. The cameras captured every moment, from the final adjustment of her veil to the nervous laughter shared with her friends. On the other side of the mansion, Richard, dressed in a tailored suit, ran an anxious hand through his hair while his closest friends gave him encouraging pats on the back. He glanced at the large wall clock, feeling a pang of anxiety mixed with regret. It wasn't the wedding itself that made him uneasy, but the shadow of the past he was desperately trying to forget. The guests, a mix of celebrities, businessmen, and influential figures, began to gather in the spacious hall decorated with white flowers and twinkling lights. Whispers spread through the room as everyone awaited the ceremony to begin. The families of the bride and groom, still adjusting to the new dynamic, exchanged uncertain glances, especially Richard's mother, who couldn't hide a look of concern. As the soft music of the string quartet filled the air, Ashley took a deep breath, preparing to descend the majestic staircase that would lead her to the altar. Each step was a reminder of the new chapter she was about to begin, a chapter that promised luxury, security, and, she hoped, love. However, not everyone shared the same joy. Laura, Richard's ex-wife, watched from afar, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. She knew something that no one else did, something that was about to turn the dream wedding into a nightmare of reality. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and everyone present knew they were about to witness an unforgettable event. But none of them were prepared for what was to come. Suddenly, the sound of the mansion's doors opening with a bang echoed through the hall, interrupting the music. All eyes turned to the back, towards the entrance. There, in the middle of the imposing doorway, stood a girl. Her light brown hair was loose, and she wore a simple dress that contrasted with the opulence around her. The expression on her face was determined, but her eyes shone with something between curiosity and sadness. Murmurs began to spread among the guests like a silent shockwave. Who is that girl? Isn't she one of the bridesmaids? Could she be lost? Confusion quickly spread, interrupting the fairy tale atmosphere that had filled the hall moments before. Ashley stopped in the middle of the staircase, her heart racing. She looked at Richard, seeking some guidance, but he was as perplexed as she was. The girl began to walk down the central aisle, her steps echoing in the sudden silence. Every move she made was closely observed, as if she carried the weight of a secret everyone was desperate to uncover. Reaching the center of the hall, the girl stopped, looked around, and finally fixed her eyes on Richard. Without hesitation, she spoke, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the silence like a sharp blade. "My name is Emily," she said, looking directly at Richard. "I am your daughter." The hall exploded in murmurs and gasps, the revelation falling like a bomb in the middle of the ceremony. Ashley, feeling the ground crumble beneath her feet, grabbed the staircase railing to steady herself. Richard turned pale, his gaze fixed on Emily, unable to process what was happening. Emily remained there, firm and resolute, awaiting her father's reaction. Time seemed to have stopped, and everyone present, caught in a moment of disbelief and shock, knew that nothing would be the same. Emily's unexpected arrival was not just an interruption, but the prelude to a truth that was about to be unveiled, forever changing the course of a day that was supposed to be perfect. The silence following Emily's declaration seemed eternal. Every face in the hall reflected a mixture of shock and disbelief. The white flowers and twinkling lights, which once created an atmosphere of celebration, now seemed to belong to a tragic theater set. Richard, still paralyzed, felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. He stared at the girl in front of him, trying to recognize some familiar trait in her. His brown eyes met Emily's, and suddenly he saw a reflection of himself in the disturbed innocence of the child. Ashley, still on the staircase, looked at Richard and then at Emily, her mind spinning in a whirlwind of thoughts. She descended the remaining steps, slowly approaching Richard, her expression alternating between confusion and pain. "Richard, what's happening?" Her voice trembled, laden with a mix of fear and anger. Before Richard could respond, a female figure emerged from the shadows of the entrance. It was Laura, Richard's ex-wife. She walked with her head held high, eyes fixed on him. Her presence was like an approaching storm, filled with repressed emotions and unspoken truths. "I will explain, Ashley," Laura said, her tone controlled but full of determination. Emily is the daughter Richard never mentioned, the result of the betrayal he tried to hide. The guests, now fully engrossed in the dramatic scene, began whispering among themselves, shocked by the revelation. Richard tried to speak, but his words died in his throat. He knew that anything he said at that moment would only make the situation worse. Laura continued, her eyes never leaving Richard's. "I brought Emily here today so everyone would know the truth. So you, Richard, would face the consequences of your actions. You thought you could start a new life, leave everything behind, but the truth always finds a way to come out." Ashley felt as if the ground were collapsing under her feet. Tears began to fill her eyes as she looked from Richard to Emily and finally to Laura. "Did you know about this, Richard? You knew and never told me?" Richard finally found his voice, though weak and broken. "Ashley, I can explain. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you." "Lose me?" Ashley repeated, her voice rising in intensity. "You already lost me, Richard. From the moment you decided to hide this from me, you lost me." Emily, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke again, her voice small but laden with pain. "I just wanted to know my father. I just wanted to understand why he was never there." The hall, once filled with joy and celebration, was now immersed in tension and sadness. Every guest felt the weight of the revelation, aware they were witnessing the collapse of an empire of lies. Laura, seeing the pain in Emily's eyes, felt a pang of guilt mixed with the bitter satisfaction of seeing Richard face his truth. Laura advanced down the central aisle with determined steps, her imposing presence contrasting with the emotional chaos she had just unleashed. All eyes were fixed on her as silence filled every corner of the room. She stopped next to Emily, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I think I owe some explanations," Laura began, her voice firm and unwavering. "Richard, I brought Emily here as a gift of truth and revelation." Richard felt a pang of fear mixed with anger. "Laura, this is between us. You had no right to ruin this day." Laura raised an eyebrow, a bitter smile curving her lips. "Right? You talk about rights, Richard? What about Emily's right to know her father? Ashley's right to know who she's marrying?" Ashley, now beside Richard, gripped his hand tightly, as if trying to extract some tangible truth from him. "Richard, is it true? Why did you never tell me about Emily?" Richard looked down, shame burning his face. I was afraid of losing everything. I didn't know how to handle it." Laura let out a dry laugh, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Afraid? The only fear you should have had was of losing your integrity. But it seems that didn't matter much to you." The guests were paralyzed, absorbing every word of the intense exchange between the three adults. Many looked at Emily, trying to understand how a child could be at the center of such a devastating emotional storm. "I brought Emily here because she deserves to know the truth," Laura continued. "She deserves to know the father who was always absent. And you, Richard, deserve to face the consequences of your actions." Richard finally raised his head, his eyes meeting Emily's. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I never meant to hurt you. I was a coward, and because of that, you suffered." Emily, with a wisdom that seemed beyond her years, simply nodded slowly. "I just wanted to know why you never came to see me." Ashley, holding back tears, looked at Richard with a mix of compassion and disappointment. "And now? What do we do now, Richard? How can we move forward?" Laura crossed her arms, her posture indicating that despite exposing the truth, she still had more to say. "Ashley, the decision is yours. I just wanted you to know the truth before making any decision." "Richard, the truth has finally caught up with you. What will you do with it?" Richard looked around, seeing the faces of friends, family, and strangers who now knew his secret. I want to try to fix things. I want to be the father Emily deserves." Laura nodded, her expression softening slightly. "It's a start, but know that words are not enough. Your actions from now on will define who you really are." The atmosphere was heavy with tension and emotion, and everyone present felt the weight of Laura's words. The truth had been revealed, and now they all faced a new reality. Emily looked at her father, hoping he would finally become the man she always wanted to know. And as the lights in the mansion continued to shine, the feeling was that Richard's true test had just begun. The hall, once adorned with smiles and laughter of celebration, was now tense like a cord about to snap. Laura, Emily, and Richard stood in the center of a public confrontation, and all eyes were fixed on them. Richard took a step forward, trying to reach Emily, but Laura quickly positioned herself between them, like a lioness protecting her cub. "Not so fast, Richard. Before any reconciliation, you must understand the pain you've caused." "Laura, please," Richard pleaded, his voice breaking. "I know I've made mistakes, but we need to talk about this in private." "Privacy," Laura responded with a bitter laugh. "You didn't worry about privacy when you were betraying our family. Now everyone here must know who you really are." The guests, still in shock, began murmuring among themselves. Some tried to comfort Ashley, who stood motionless, with tears threatening to fall. Others looked at Richard with disapproval, while some seemed simply mesmerized by the drama unfolding before them. "Richard, how could you?" Ashley's voice finally broke, full of pain and betrayal. "How could you hide something like this from me? How could you make me believe everything was fine when it clearly wasn't?" I was afraid," Richard stammered. "Afraid of losing you, afraid of facing my failures." Emily, with eyes full of tears, looked at her father. "You never thought about me? Never wondered how I was? If I needed you?" Richard felt each of Emily's words like a knife in his heart. "I thought about you every day, Emily, but I was a coward. I didn't know how to face it." Laura crossed her arms, her expression a mix of sadness and anger. "The truth, Richard, is that you only thought about yourself. And now, finally, you must face the consequences of your actions." The guests were divided between compassion for Emily and Ashley and disapproval of Richard. Some whispered about the scandals that might arise, while others simply watched, unable to look away. Suddenly, one of the guests, an old friend of Richard, stepped forward. "Richard, we all make mistakes, but what you do now is what really matters. Show us that you can change, that you can be the father Emily needs." Richard, with tears in his eyes, nodded. "I will change. I promise all of you, especially you, Emily, that I will do everything in my power to be a better father." Ashley, still struggling to process everything, took a step back. "And what about me, Richard? How can we move forward after this?" Richard looked at Ashley, his expression full of regret. "I know I need to regain your trust, Ashley, and I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to try if you give me the chance." The hall was heavy with tension, everyone present feeling the weight of Richard's words. Laura, though still firm, seemed to have softened a bit. "Words are a start, Richard, but your actions are what really count." As the guests watched, they knew they were witnessing not only the collapse of a wedding ceremony, but the beginning of a difficult path to redemption and reconciliation. Emily, with her big hopeful eyes, held her mother's hand, knowing that regardless of what happened next, she had finally been heard. Ashley, with her wedding dress shimmering under the hall lights, felt the weight of all her expectations and dreams collapsing around her. She had dreamed of this day since she was a little girl, and now everything was being destroyed by an unexpected truth. Her eyes, once full of hope, were now brimming with tears of pain and betrayal. She stepped away from Richard, her steps echoing through the tense silence of the hall. "Richard," she began, her voice trembling, "how could you hide something so important from me? How could you make me believe everything was fine when it clearly wasn't?" Richard tried to approach, but Ashley raised a hand, stopping him. "No," she said firmly. "Don't come any closer. I need answers, not excuses." The guests watched the scene with wide eyes, some murmuring among themselves, others simply too shocked to react. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, each of Ashley's words penetrating deeply into Richard's heart. "I loved you," Ashley continued, her voice growing in intensity. "I believed in us, in the future we were building together. But now I feel like a fool." Richard, feeling the weight of guilt, tried to explain. "Ashley, I know I was wrong. I was afraid of losing you. I didn't know how to handle the situation." "Afraid?" Ashley laughed bitterly, tears finally streaming down her face. "Afraid? You should have been afraid of losing me by being dishonest. What else have you hidden from me? How many other lies are there?" Emily, who had been standing by her mother's side, took a step forward. "I don't want to cause more pain, but I needed to know my father. I needed to understand why he was never there for me." Ashley looked at the girl, her eyes softening momentarily. "Emily, you are not to blame for any of this. You deserve to know your father. But what do I do now? How do I trust someone who hid such an important part of his life from me?" Ashley's mother, observing the scene with a heavy heart, finally intervened. "Ashley, dear, maybe we should sit down and talk about this in private. This is a difficult moment for all of us." But Ashley shook her head, determined. "No, Mom. This needs to be resolved here and now. Richard, you need to be honest with me. What else are you hiding?" Richard, feeling increasingly cornered, looked to Laura for some form of support but found only an expression of disappointment. "There are no more secrets, Ashley. Emily is the only thing I hid from you. I just wanted to protect our relationship." "Protect?" Ashley repeated, incredulous. "You destroyed our trust, and without trust, there is no relationship." The hall was in absolute silence, everyone present holding their breath as they awaited Richard's response. He knew that his next words could determine not only the future of his relationship with Ashley, but his entire life. "Ashley," he said finally, his voice full of emotion, "I am willing to do whatever it takes to regain your trust. I will face the consequences of my actions. I will be the father Emily deserves and the man you thought I was." Ashley was silent for a moment, absorbing Richard's words. Finally, she sighed deeply, looking at Emily and then at Richard. "This won't be easy, and I don't know if I can forgive you, but for now we need time. Time to process all this and decide what we really want." The guests continued to watch, knowing they had witnessed a moment of raw and intense truth. And as Ashley walked away, still holding Emily's hand, everyone knew this was just the beginning of a painful, but perhaps necessary journey toward redemption and understanding. The atmosphere in the hall was almost palpable, charged with tension and shock. What should have been a day of celebration and joy had turned into a scene of emotional chaos and disillusionment. The music had stopped, and the murmurs of the guests were the only sound breaking the silence. Ashley, with a broken heart, let go of Emily's hand and turned to the guests, trying to find some sense in what had just happened. She looked at the familiar faces, some full of sympathy, others of judgment. Her friends, who had been laughing and taking pictures moments ago, were now frozen, unsure of how to react. Suddenly, one of the bridesmaids, Sarah, approached Ashley, offering a comforting hug. "Ashley, I'm so sorry. This is unbelievable. Are you okay?" Ashley shook her head, tears beginning to fall. "No, Sarah, I'm not okay. Nothing is okay." Meanwhile, Richard was trying to deal with the storm he had unleashed. Some of his closest friends approached, trying to offer support. "Richard, we need to get out of here. Solve this in a more private place," suggested Michael, his longtime friend. "I know, Michael," Richard replied, his voice trembling, But how do I get out of this? How do I fix something that is so broken? Laura, on the other hand, watched the scene with a mix of satisfaction and pain. She had exposed the truth, but at what cost? She looked at Emily, whose innocent and confused expression broke her heart. Emily, let's get out of here. We've caused enough damage. Emily, holding her mother's hand tightly, nodded. Okay, Mom, but I wanted to talk more with my dad. Before they could move, one of the elderly guests, Mr. Johnson, raised his voice above the tumult. This is not the time or place for these family dramas. All of you need to resolve this privately. The hall fell into an awkward silence, but the tension was far from dissipating. Guests began to gather their coats and bags, murmuring among themselves as they prepared to leave. Some cast sympathetic looks at Ashley, others curious glances at Emily, and many disapproving stares at Richard. A younger guest, visibly upset, left hastily, saying, I can't believe we're seeing this. What a disaster. Amid the chaos, Ashley found the strength to speak again, her voice broken but determined. I thank you all for coming. I'm sorry for all of this, but I think it's best we end the ceremony here. The event organizers, stunned, began to discreetly dismantle the decorations and pack up the musical instruments. The photographers, who had been capturing every joyful moment, were now documenting an emotional disaster that no one would soon forget. Richard, feeling the urgency to do something, anything, approached Ashley once more. Ashley, please, just one more minute. I know I can't fix this now, but I need you to know that I will try. Ashley looked at him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Richard, I need space. I need to think. We all do. Please, just leave me alone for a while. Richard nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the consequences of his actions fall on him like an avalanche. He watched as Ashley walked away, leading Emily by the hand, Laura by her side. The hall, which had once glittered with promises of a radiant future, was now empty and somber, a painful reminder of a shattered dream. As the last notes of the music ceased and the murmurs of the guests increased, the tension in the hall became unbearable. The guests, who had expected a luxurious and surprise-free wedding, now found themselves trapped in a whirlwind of emotions and scandals. Who is that girl? Whispered an elegantly dressed lady, her fan nervously fluttering. I never heard of a daughter. It feels like a movie, replied her husband, adjusting his glasses as he tried to process the scene before him. One of those dramas they show on TV. Ashley's friends, who had been radiant with joy, now looked at each other in shock and discomfort. Sarah, the bridesmaid, approached other friends and whispered, What do we do now? Do we stay or leave? Meanwhile, on the other side of the hall, Richard's business colleagues exchanged worried glances. This could affect our partnership, murmured one, while another simply shook his head, perplexed. At the back of the hall, a group of young people tried to capture the moment on their smartphones, screens glowing as they recorded videos and took photos. This will blow up on social media, said one, with a mix of excitement and disapproval. Do you think he knew? Asked a young woman, while posting a photo of the scene on Instagram. Of course he knew, replied her friend. Who hides a daughter like this? What a horrible thing. Ashley's family was visibly divided. Her mother, eyes filled with tears, tried to calm the closest relatives. Please, let's try to keep our composure. Ashley needs our support now more than ever. However, Ashley's father was inconsolable. This is a disgrace, he repeated to himself, shaking his head. How could we let this happen? In the midst of the crowd, some tried to intervene, offering words of comfort or attempting to mediate the situation. Let's give them space to resolve this, suggested one of Ashley's uncles, helping to disperse the more curious guests. Ashley's grandmother, a stern-faced elderly woman with white hair, finally spoke, her voice cutting through the air. This is not the time for gossip or judgments. Let's give the family the privacy they deserve. And so, gradually, the guests began to disperse, many still murmuring among themselves, trying to understand what exactly had happened. The expressions ranged from shock to sympathy, from curiosity to disillusionment. Meanwhile, Ashley, Richard, Laura, and Emily remained in the center of the storm, surrounded by the fragments of a day that had been meticulously planned to be perfect. Each of them felt the weight of shattered expectations, trying to find some sense amid the chaos. The event organizers, visibly disconcerted, began to dismantle the decorations. The flowers, which once symbolized love and hope, now seemed only sad reminders of a broken dream. At the back of the hall, a young waiter, who had been serving champagne with a smile, now watched the scene with a somber look. "I've never seen anything like this," he commented to a colleague while collecting the abandoned glasses. "This will stay in everyone's memory for a long time." And so, the hall slowly emptied, leaving behind a heavy silence and the feeling that nothing would be the same. Each guest carried with them a part of that story, a memory of a day that, unexpectedly and painfully, turned into a landmark of revelations and inescapable truths. As the hall emptied, the murmurs gave way to a silence filled with expectations and uncertainties. Richard, still in shock, found himself surrounded by a small group of close friends and family, all anxious for explanations. Ashley stood a short distance away, her eyes red and filled with tears, while Laura and Emily remained side by side, a stark contrast of determination and vulnerability. Laura, wasting no time, began to reveal the hidden details of Richard's betrayal. "This is the man you all thought you knew," she said, her voice laden with deep bitterness. "Richard not only betrayed me but hid Emily's existence from all of us." Richard tried to intervene, his voice trembling. "Laura, please don't do this here. We can resolve this privately." "Privately?" Laura responded, anger boiling in her words. "You had years to resolve this privately, Richard. Now it's time for the truth." She turned to the remaining guests, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and pain. "Richard cheated on me with Ashley while we were still married. He swore we'd never see each other again. But here we are, forced to deal with his lies." The murmurs resumed, louder and more urgent. Guests exchanged surprised glances and hushed comments. Some discreetly stepped away, while others stood still, unable to look away from the unfolding drama. "I met him when he was just an ordinary man," Laura continued, her voice firmer. "We built a life together, or at least I thought we were building one. But it was all a sham. He was building a house of cards. And today, it all came crashing down." Ashley stepped forward, her face a mask of confusion and despair. "Richard, is it true? Did you really cheat on Laura with me? And hid Emily from me all this time?" Richard lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. "Ashley, yes, it's true. I made many mistakes. I was afraid of losing you, and I ended up losing myself in the process." Emily, with her innocent eyes filled with pain, looked directly at her father. "Why did you never come to see me? Why wasn't I important to you?" Richard felt as if his heart would break. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I was a coward. I didn't know how to face what I had done, so I ran away. But you were always important to me, even if I didn't show it." The guests watched in silence, feeling the weight of the revelations. Ashley's grandmother, tears in her eyes, shook her head slowly. "Richard, you not only betrayed these women but also destroyed the trust and respect we all had for you." Michael, Richard's old friend, stepped forward. "Richard, we all make mistakes, but lying and hiding the truth for so long, that's something hard to forgive. You need to regain everyone's trust, starting with these 3 women." Richard nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know, Michael. I know I have a long way to go. I just hope that one day, all of you can forgive me." Laura took a deep breath, the anger in her eyes beginning to soften. "Forgiveness won't be easy, Richard. But maybe, if you really change, we can find a way to move forward." Ashley, still struggling with her own emotions, looked at Emily and then at Richard. "And what about us, Richard? How do we start over with so many lies between us?" Richard looked at her, determination finally shining in his eyes. "One step at a time, Ashley. I will prove to you, to Laura, and to Emily that I am a changed man. But I need the chance to do that. The hall, which had once been full of celebration and joy, was now immersed in contemplative silence. Each guest, carrying the weight of the revelations, knew they had witnessed not only the fall of a man, but the beginning of a painful path to redemption and reconciliation. The tension in the hall was transforming into a kind of silent mourning. Everyone present knew they had witnessed something deep and painful, but the story wasn't over yet. Emily, the girl whose appearance had caused such an upheaval, remained there, in the center of the emotional chaos, her face expressing a mixture of sadness and hope. Richard, still shaken by the revelations and public confession, cautiously approached Emily. Every step was a reminder of the failures that had brought him to this point, but he knew he needed to face reality. "Emily," he began, his voice soft but trembling, "can I talk to you?" Emily looked at him, her big, sad eyes reflecting the confusion of feelings she could barely understand. "Why now?" she asked, her voice laden with a pain no child should feel. "Why did you only notice me now when everything is falling apart?" Richard knelt before her, trying to level himself to her eyes. "I have no excuses that can justify my mistakes," he said, his voice choked. "I was afraid and selfish, but I want to change that. I want to be present in your life, if you'll give me the chance." Emily remained silent for a moment, her conflicting emotions dancing in her eyes. "I waited for you," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I waited so long for you to show up, to notice me. I don't know if I can just forgive and forget everything." Laura, watching the scene, felt a pang of pain and empathy. She knew how much Emily longed for a father, and seeing her daughter so vulnerable broke her heart. "Emily, dear," she said gently, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder, "you have every right to feel this way. None of this is your fault." Ashley, who had been watching the interaction closely, felt a knot form in her throat. She, too, was a victim of Richard's lies, but seeing Emily so hurt awakened a protective instinct in her. "Emily," she said, approaching carefully, "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I think we all need time. Time to heal, to understand, to decide how to move forward." Emily looked at Ashley, her eyes softening slightly. "I just want to know that I have a father," she said, tears finally streaming down her cheeks. "I want him to know me, to care about me." Richard felt the weight of Emily's words like a punch in the stomach. "I care, Emily, and I will prove it to you. Every day, for the rest of my life, if you let me." The guests, who had maintained a respectful distance until then, felt the emotions intensify. Some discreetly wiped away tears, while others exchanged looks of understanding and support. Ashley's grandmother, always a strong and matriarchal presence, stepped forward. "Richard, you have a long journey ahead of you, but if you are truly committed to changing, you will have our support. But remember, forgiveness is not immediate. It's something you will have to earn, day by day." Laura nodded, her eyes still fixed on Emily. "I didn't do this to destroy you, Richard, but to give Emily the truth she deserves. And now, it's up to you to do what's right." Richard nodded, determination replacing despair in his eyes. "I will do whatever it takes. For Emily, for Ashley, for all of us." The hall, once the setting of a glamorous party, was now a stage for redemption and difficult promises. Everyone present knew they had witnessed something rare and true. A man's attempt to mend the fragments of his life, a child's pain that only wanted to be loved, and the strength of women demanding the truth. As Emily finally accepted her father's embrace, the guests began to feel a thread of hope. The road would be long and arduous, but there, at that moment, a small step had been taken in the right direction. And everyone knew the real test was yet to come, in the actions and choices each would make from that day forward. The hall began to empty, but the emotional weight remained heavy in the air. Richard, now determined to face the consequences of his actions, felt the monumental task ahead of him. He looked at Emily, Laura, and Ashley, knowing he needed to start rebuilding the bridges he had burned. "I want to start over," Richard said, his voice firm but laden with emotion. "I know it won't be easy, and my words alone are not enough. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to regain your trust and love." Laura, her eyes fixed on her ex-husband, nodded slowly. "Words are a beginning, Richard, but actions are what really matter. You will have to prove that you have changed day by day." Ashley, still processing the revelation, looked at Richard with a mix of pain and hope. "If we want this to work, we need to be honest and open. No more secrets, no more lies, and you will have to work hard to regain my trust." Richard nodded, aware of the challenge ahead. "I will do that, Ashley. I will be the man you deserve, and the father Emily needs." Emily, holding her mother's hand, took a step forward. "I just want you to be present in my life. I want to know that I can count on you." Richard knelt before her, his eyes full of tears. "I will be there, Emily. I promise you that I will never leave you again. Let's start over together." The few guests who still remained watched in silence, feeling the sincerity and weight of Richard's words. It was a moment of vulnerability and hope, a glimpse of redemption amid the chaos. Ashley's grandmother, a wise and strong presence, stepped forward. "Richard, you have a long road ahead of you, but if you are truly committed to changing, we will be here to support you. But remember, forgiveness is something you will have to earn." Richard stood up, taking a deep breath. "I understand, and I am ready to start this journey. I want to do whatever it takes to correct my mistakes and build a better future for all of us." Laura looked at Emily, her eyes softening. "Emily, are you ready to give your father a chance?" Emily nodded, her tears finally giving way to a small smile. "Yes, Mom, I'm ready." Ashley took a deep breath, feeling the magnitude of the decision she was about to make. "Richard, I will give you a chance, but know that it will be a difficult road, and you will have to prove your worth every day." Richard approached, carefully holding Ashley's hand. "I expect nothing less, Ashley, and I am ready to do whatever it takes." The remaining guests began to move slowly, giving the family space to start processing what had happened and begin the path to healing. The hall, which had been full of joy and celebration, now transformed into a place of reflection and new promises. As the first rays of sun began to appear on the horizon, Richard, Ashley, Emily, and Laura approached each other, feeling the fragility of the moment but also the strength of renewed hope. They knew the road ahead would be full of challenges, but there, together, they were ready to face whatever came. And so, with the hall empty and the world outside waiting, a new journey began. A journey of forgiveness, reconciliation, and the difficult but necessary task of rebuilding what had been destroyed. The silence that enveloped the hall was almost palpable, interrupted only by the soft sound of the tense breaths of Ashley, Richard, Laura, and Emily. Everyone knew that the moment of truth had arrived. It was time to make difficult decisions, decisions that would shape the future of each of them. Ashley looked at Richard, her eyes still shining with the pain of betrayal, but also with a spark of determination. "Richard, this won't be easy for any of us. We need to decide how we will move forward, how we will deal with all of this." Richard nodded, feeling the weight of Ashley's, Laura's, and Emily's expectations. "I know, Ashley. I know I've hurt you deeply. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to regain your trust." Laura, arms crossed, observed the scene with a mix of skepticism and hope. "And what about Emily? She needs stability, needs a father who is present, who puts her first." Emily, holding her mother's hand, looked at Richard with eyes that seemed to see through his soul. "Dad, I just want to know that you'll be there for me, that you'll support and love me, even when it's hard." Richard knelt in front of her, holding her small hands in his. "I will be there, Emily. I promise to be present at all the important moments, to never let you down again." Ashley sighed deeply, trying to organize her thoughts and emotions. "We need clear rules, Richard. Boundaries and commitments that all of us can follow. This can't be something vague or open to interpretation." Richard nodded, agreeing on the need for structure. "I agree, Ashley. Let's establish a routine. Ensure that Emily has the support she needs from both parents. And I will be present, be part of her life, as I should have been from the beginning. Laura stepped forward, her expression serious. And what about us, Richard? How will we deal with our past? With the pain and anger I still feel? Richard looked directly at Laura, his voice full of regret. Laura, I know I've hurt you deeply. I can't erase the past, but I want to do whatever I can to remedy the damage. If that means therapy, difficult conversations, or anything else, I'm willing to do it. Ashley, feeling a glimmer of hope, spoke more firmly. And us, Richard? How do we rebuild what was destroyed? How do we learn to trust each other again? Richard held Ashley's hand, looking into her eyes. Ashley, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Couples therapy, rebuilding trust, being completely transparent. I know it will be a long and difficult road, but I'm committed to walking it. Emily, seeing the seriousness in her father's eyes, felt a small spark of hope. I just want a real family. Even if it's hard, I want us to try. The hall, once a stage of celebration, was now a space for serious decisions and renewed commitments. Everyone present knew that the road ahead would be full of challenges, but also opportunities for healing and growth. Ashley's grandmother, always a wise and firm presence, stepped forward. Remember, forgiveness is a process. Trust is something that is earned daily. But if all of you are committed to working together, there is hope. Richard, Ashley, Laura, and Emily gathered in a hesitant but sincere embrace, each of them feeling the gravity of the moment and the importance of the decisions they were making. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they were ready to face the challenges together with hope and determination. And so, in the silence of the empty hall, a new promise was made, a promise to rebuild, to forgive, and to move forward together. The news of the dramatic unfolding of Richard and Ashley's wedding spread quickly. What started as a luxurious and perfect ceremony turned into a scandal of epic proportions. Within hours, photos and videos of the event flooded social media, generating a storm of comments and reactions. The next day, Richard Marshall's name was splashed across all the headlines. Billionaire exposed in disastrous wedding, and secrets revealed at the altar were some of the titles that captured the public's attention. Television programs, blogs, and influencers were all talking about it. Richard's business colleagues were in turmoil. In meeting rooms and conferences, the topic of the moment was the scandal involving one of the most respected businessmen in the country. Some expressed concerns about how it would affect their partnerships and investments. His credibility is at stake, said one executive, while another added, we need to distance ourselves from this mess. Meanwhile, on social media, the story was analyzed and dissected by millions. Hashtags like #Disastrous_wedding and #FamilySecrets went viral. Opinions were divided between those who condemned Richard for his betrayal and those who expressed sympathy for Ashley and Emily. Empathetic comments and fierce criticisms mixed in a torrent of emotions. At home, Ashley turned off the television, unable to bear watching another debate about her personal life being exposed publicly. She looked at Richard, sitting on the sofa with a defeated expression. All of this? It's too much, she said, her voice choked. How are we going to deal with all this exposure? Richard ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. I don't know, Ashley. I can only apologize once again for all of this. But we need to be strong for Emily. Laura, who was in the kitchen making tea to calm their nerves, entered the room. The media will exploit this to the fullest, she said, handing a cup to Ashley. We need to prepare for the coming days. It will be hard, but together we can face it. Emily, sitting next to her mother, held a teddy bear, a recent gift from Richard in an attempt to reconnect. Mom, why is everyone talking about us? What will happen now? Ashley hugged Emily comfortingly. We'll be okay, dear. It will take some time, but we will get through this. At school, Emily faced curious glances and uncomfortable questions from her classmates. Is it true that your dad has another family? Asked a girl with malicious curiosity. Emily, trying to be strong, replied firmly, he's trying to be a good dad now. That's what matters. Richard, aware of the gravity of the situation, decided to make a public statement. In an impromptu press conference in front of his company, he faced the flashes and microphones. "I have made serious mistakes that deeply affected my family. I am deeply sorry and committed to doing everything I can to repair the damage caused." The public response was mixed. Some recognized Richard's courage in admitting his mistakes publicly, while others remained skeptical. But regardless of opinions, one thing was certain. The story continued to capture everyone's attention. At the end of the day, as the family gathered for a quiet dinner, Richard looked around the table. "We're in the middle of a storm, but we'll get through this together. I know it won't be easy, but I promise all of you that I'll do my best." Ashley, holding Richard's hand, looked at Emily and then at Laura. "We need to support each other. The outside world can be cruel, but inside here we're a family, and we'll come out of this stronger." Laura nodded, feeling a slight hope emerge. "We'll manage together." And so, in the midst of the whirlwind of public attention and judgment, Richard's family began to build a new foundation, one based on truth, forgiveness, and the determination to move forward, united against the adversities the future might bring. The media furor had calmed down, but the impact of the revelations still reverberated in the lives of Richard, Ashley, Emily, and Laura. Each of them was trying to find a new normal, to face the raw reality that was unfolding before them. The healing process, though slow and painful, was underway. Richard, determined to regain his family's trust, started attending therapy sessions. He knew he needed to face his inner demons and understand the reasons behind his actions. "I need to be honest with myself before I can be honest with others," he confessed to his therapist, a woman with a compassionate look who guided Richard through his confusions and regrets. Ashley, for her part, decided that she also needed help to deal with the pain and betrayal. She joined a support group for people facing marital betrayals. There, she found other women and men who shared their stories of pain, but also of overcoming. "We are all in the same boat," said a woman during a session, "and together, we can find the strength to move forward." Laura, who initially brought the devastating truth to light, now saw her decision as a chance for a new beginning. She and Emily began spending more time together, rediscovering the mother-daughter bond that had been overshadowed by Richard's lies and omissions. "Let's travel," Laura suggested one day. "Just the two of us. We need some time away from all this." Emily, eager for a break from the storm her life had become, agreed enthusiastically. Mother and daughter traveled to a small coastal town, where they spent their days exploring beaches, hiking trails, and, most importantly, talking about the future. "I will always be here for you, Emily," Laura promised as they watched the sunset together. "And I want you to know that you are loved, no matter what." Meanwhile, Richard was making sincere efforts to reconnect with Emily. On one of their supervised visits, he took her to an amusement park. "I used to come here when I was a child," Richard said, holding Emily's hand as they walked among the attractions. "I want to share these moments with you now." Emily, still cautious, began to relax as she saw the sincerity in her father's eyes. They laughed together on the Ferris wheel and shared cotton candy, small moments that slowly began to rebuild the trust between them. "I like it when we're like this, Dad," Emily said, hugging him at the end of the day. Ashley, observing these efforts, felt a mix of hope and skepticism. She knew that the road to reconciliation would be long, but seeing Richard and Emily together gave her a glimpse that maybe, just maybe, forgiveness was possible. On a quiet night, after Emily had gone to bed, Ashley and Richard sat on their porch. "You're really trying," Ashley said softly. "I can see that." "I am," Richard replied, his voice full of emotion. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family." Ashley held his hand, feeling the sincerity in his words. "We still have a long way to go, Richard. But if we continue like this, one day at a time, maybe we can find a new beginning." Laura and Emily returned from their trip, renewed and closer than ever. "How was it?" Richard asked, genuinely interested. "It was wonderful," Laura replied with a smile. "We needed it. And Emily is ready to take another step in our healing journey." The family, now more united, began to create new routines and traditions. Family dinners, game nights, and Sunday walks became sacred moments for them. Each was learning to deal with their pain and to find joy in the small things. Richard, determined to be a better father, began to participate actively in Emily's school life, helping with homework and attending school events. He also continued his therapy, understanding that the journey to becoming a better person was continuous. Ashley, feeling stronger each day, also dedicated herself to her career and found a new purpose in helping others who had gone through similar experiences. She became an active voice in her support group, inspiring others with her story of resilience and hope. Laura, finding a new balance in her life, began to explore new interests and hobbies. She rediscovered her passion for photography and began capturing precious moments of everyday life, reminding herself that beauty can be found even in the most difficult moments. And so, with each step they took, each effort they made, the family began to heal. The scars of the past were still there, but they were learning to live with them, to find strength in their weaknesses, and to build a future together based on truth, love, and forgiveness. Time passed, and the house that had once been the stage for betrayals and secrets now pulsed with a new energy. Every corner seemed to breathe a renewed sense of hope and determination. The family, united in their healing journey, had transformed their pains into strengths, their failures into opportunities for growth. Emily was excited for her piano recital. It was an important event at school, and she had prepared diligently. The school hall was crowded, full of proud and anxious parents. Richard, Ashley, and Laura were in the front row, all ready to support Emily in her big moment. "You'll do great, dear," Laura said, squeezing Emily's hand before she went on stage. "Remember, we're all here for you." Richard, with an encouraging smile, added, "We are very proud of you, Emily. Show everyone how talented you are." Emily nodded, a shy smile on her lips, and walked to the piano. When her fingers touched the keys, the room filled with a soft and powerful melody, each note laden with emotion and dedication. The audience fell into absolute silence, completely captivated by Emily's performance. As she played, Richard looked around, observing the expressions on the faces of the other parents and children. He remembered the times he had been absent, the missed opportunities, and the broken promises. But he also felt a deep gratitude for being there now, being part of his daughter's life in a way he had never imagined possible. Ashley, sitting next to Richard, felt a wave of emotions as she listened to Emily's music. She remembered all the challenges they had faced, the tears shed, and the sleepless nights. But she also felt a deep sense of peace, knowing they had overcome the obstacles together as a real family. When the last note sounded, the hall exploded in applause. Emily stood up and took a bow, her face lit up with a radiant smile. She ran into her family's arms, who enveloped her in a warm embrace. "You were amazing, Emily," Ashley exclaimed, her eyes full of pride. "We are so proud of you," added Richard, holding Emily firmly. "You showed the world how talented and brave you are." Laura, her eyes sparkling with tears of joy, said, "You are the best, dear. Never forget that." That night, back at home, the family celebrated with a special dinner. The table was full of laughter, stories, and love. Each dish, each laugh, was a testament to their journey together. "You know," Richard said, raising his glass, "we've been through very tough times, but we are here, together, stronger than ever. And that's what matters." Ashley, raising her glass in response, added, "To family, to truth, and to the future we are building together." Laura and Emily raised their glasses, and everyone toasted, feeling the warmth of unity and the love that surrounded them. After dinner, while Emily slept peacefully in her room, Richard and Ashley sat on the porch, watching the stars. "It's been quite a journey," Ashley said, resting her head on Richard's shoulder. "Yes, it has," Richard replied, holding her hand. "But I wouldn't trade these moments for anything in the world. They have shaped us, strengthened us, and we are just beginning." Laura, looking at the scene through the window, smiled. She knew the road would still be full of challenges, but she felt a deep confidence in the future. They had found a way to turn pain into strength, to rebuild trust and love. As the night deepened, the house, once marked by secrets and lies, was now filled with a peaceful silence, a promise of better days. And so, with renewed hearts and unshakable faith in each other, Richard, Ashley, Emily, and Laura prepared for whatever came next, together. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel now. Click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Leave a like if you liked it,